No one ever chooses to be born invisible. But Alara always knew that's exactly what it was inside that house. A tolerated mistake, an unwelcome presence, an inconvenient reminder of her father's first marriage. When her mother died, she was still too young to understand the word abandonment. But she understood the silence. She understood the cold stares. She understood when her father remarried and only called her by her name when he needed to reprimand her. His new wife didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her disdain was more effective than any physical aggression. She smiled at guests, organized lavish dinners, spoke of pack honor, and behind the scenes, she made sure to remind Alara that she was weak-blooded. Alara's father was an influential beta within the Northern Territory. He wasn't an alpha, but he faithfully served the throne of the great alpha king who ruled over all the unified packs. And, in that rigid structure, purity of lineage was everything. Alara had not inherited her father's strength. He had never fully revealed his wolf side. She was fragile, silent, always sickly as a child, always the last one to be chosen for training. She could hear the other young women laughing as she walked by. She will never be chosen by an alpha, perhaps not even for an omega. But she endured it, because, despite everything, there was something inside her that never completely broke: hope. Until the day everything changed. That night, the mansion was different. The servants hurried back and forth. His stepmother wore jewelry that only appeared on grand occasions. His father seemed nervous, not because of her, but because of his reputation. Alara was summoned to the main hall. She would always remember how everyone was positioned, as if they were expecting a show. His stepmother was the first to speak. "You always wanted to be useful, didn't you, Alara?" Those words already carried cruelty. King Alpha has requested a new personal assistant. It seemed like the air was leaving his lungs. Everyone knew what that meant. King Alpha Kale Draven, the ruthless one. The man that nobody could please. The sovereign who had survived a brutal assassination attempt 2 years earlier, an internal attack, a betrayal within his own council. It was said that he had killed those responsible with his own hands before succumbing to his injuries. They also said that he was never the same again. Kale Draven rarely appeared in public. Some said he was permanently injured. Others said his anger had become even more dangerous. The servants sent to the castle never lasted more than a day. Some left crying. Others simply never came back. Alara felt the ground shake. "Me?" Her voice came out almost inaudible. Her father didn't look at her. "It is an honor to serve the king," he said, but his expression revealed something else. Relief. Relief at getting rid of her. Her stepmother added with a cold smile, "Consider this an opportunity to prove that you are useful for something." That same night, her few belongings were packed into a suitcase that was far too small. No hugs, no goodbyes, no promise of a return. When the carriage passed through the property gates, Alara understood. She wasn't being promoted. It was being delivered. As punishment. As a means of exchange. As a sacrifice. During the journey to the Central Territory, the cold seemed to seep into his bones. Not just the winter chill, but fear. Everyone knew the stories. King Alpha trusted no one. He would fire assistants for minor mistakes. He demanded absolute silence, inflexible rules, impeccable punctuality, and above all, total loyalty. She clasped her hands in her lap. If she were honest with herself, she would know the real reason for her choice. She was disposable. If something happened, there would be no scandal. When the castle towers appeared on the horizon, his heart pounded so hard it ached. The castle was ancient, imposing, built of black stone that seemed to absorb the light. No corner conveyed warmth, only power and loneliness. As soon as she arrived, she was greeted by a tall guard with a scar across his face. "Another one?" he murmured, almost with pity. She didn't answer. She was led through long, silent corridors. Old portraits of former alphas adorned the walls. Stern eyes followed her as she walked. Each step echoed like a warning. Finally, they stopped in front of large, carved wooden doors. "Remember," said the guard before knocking, "don't look directly at him until he allows it." The door opened. The office was spacious, but the lighting was dim. A large window at the back let in the pale light of the late afternoon, and there he was. King Alpha Kale Draven, seated. Property. His powerful physique was still evident. Broad shoulders, strong arms resting on the chair. But his legs, stiff, wrapped in dark fabric. A scar marked the left side of his face, extending down to his neck. But it was the eyes that were truly frightening. Golden eyes. Cold. Security guards. She felt the weight of the predatory instinct. He was analyzing her as if he were assessing prey. Name. His voice was deep, controlled, imbued with something that was more than just authority. It was exhaustion. Alara Vale, my lord. Silence. Too long. He tilted his head slightly. Do you know where it is? Yes, sir. So you know I don't tolerate incompetence. She swallowed hard. I'll learn quickly. For a second, something changed in his eyes. Surprise? Or irritation? Everyone says that. He made a brief gesture with his hand. You start now. There was no guidance. There were no explanations. A stack of documents was shoved toward her. Organized by political priority, territorial risk, and diplomatic urgency. You have 1 hour. She had no idea how to do that. But he sat down. He took a deep breath. And it began. As she organized the papers, she felt his eyes on her. There was no confidence in that look. There was distrust, contained anger, and something deeper, pain. When he finished, he placed the neatly arranged pile on the table. He examined it. One by one, the silence seemed overwhelming. Finally, he said, You made 3 mistakes. Her heart sank. But those were strategic errors, not laziness. He looked up at her. This is new. She didn't know if that was a compliment or simply a postponement of the dismissal. He closed the last document. You stay. For now. She released the breath she didn't even know she was holding, but then he added, Don't confuse that with approval. The way he said it made it clear. He expected her to fail, just like everyone else. She gave a discreet bow. Yes, sir. When she left the room, her legs were trembling. But something inside her was different. For the first time in her life, someone had evaluated her based on her abilities, even if it's difficult, even if expecting the worst. That night, in the small room reserved for servants, she looked out the window at the dark towers of the castle. She didn't know yet, but that punishment would be the beginning of something that would change not only his life, but the entire kingdom. Because what nobody knew. The assassination attempt against King Alpha had not been fully resolved. The real traitor was still alive, and Alara's arrival at the castle was no mere coincidence. It was the beginning of a buried truth, and when that truth came to light, there would be punishment for all the cowards. The following morning, Alara was woken up before sunrise, not out of politeness, but in order. One of the oldest servants knocked on the door. The king is not waiting, he simply said. She stood up quickly, put on the simple uniform of the administrative wing, and tied her hair back. Her hands still trembled slightly, not from pure fear, but from constant tension, as if she were being watched the whole time, because it was. Kale's office again. Draven noticed that he was already awake, motionless before the large window, his chair strategically positioned to observe the horizon. The sun was still rising timidly, painting the sky in cool, golden hues. But he didn't seem to appreciate it. It seemed he was waging a silent battle with the world itself. You arrived 2 minutes late, he said, without turning around. She looked at the clock hanging on the wall. There was still 1 minute left. His heart raced. It was a test. She took a deep breath. The time given was 5:30. It is now 5:29. Silence. The tension was palpable. Slowly, he turned his chair around, staring at her. His golden eyes locked onto hers, assessing her. There was no screaming. There was no explosive rage. There was something worse. Expected submission. But she didn't lower her gaze, not out of defiance, but because I was tired of being small. Something almost imperceptible passed across his face. Very good. It was the first time I hadn't corrected her. He slid a document toward her. The council requires my presence at a hearing tomorrow. I refuse. She read it quickly. It was a strategic meeting with leaders from allied territories. Refusing could be interpreted as political weakness. She spoke before thinking. A heavy silence fell. A guard, discreetly positioned in the background, tensed his body. But Kale merely observed her. Are you telling me what to do? She felt her heart race. But he didn't back down. I'm suggesting an alternative. His eyes narrowed. Continue. Show up. But limit your time. Show control. Not absence. Silence. Far away. He could fire her right then and there. Or something worse. But then he let out an almost imperceptible breath. You still haven't learned how to be afraid? She held his gaze. I've been afraid my whole life, sir. The sentence came out before I could stop it. And for the first time, he seemed to hear something beyond the words. The atmosphere changed. No longer just hierarchy, but recognition. He looked away first. Organize your schedule for partial attendance. She nodded. As he moved around the room, he began to notice details. Little things. The stiffness in his legs wasn't just the result of a common injury. There were subtle marks on the leather of the chair, scratches, as if something had happened there. An attack inside the room itself? Or would he react right there? The attempted assassination still echoed through the castle corridors. Whispers said it was someone from the council, but nobody knew for sure, or he pretended not to know. For the remainder of the morning, Kale set nearly impossible tasks: reorganization of old treaties, classification of confidential military records, analysis of financial reports from subordinate packs. He didn't explain, he didn't give guidance. I was watching, hoping she would fail. But Alara had something that no one else there possessed: silent resistance. She had not been trained as a warrior, but she had learned to survive emotionally. And that, she was beginning to realize, was something he was also trying to do: survive. In the middle of the afternoon, something unexpected happened. One of the advisors entered without warning. Tall, elegant, with a calculated smile. Alpha Darian Vale, a distant cousin of his father. Alara felt her stomach churn. He didn't recognize her right away. Or he pretended not to recognize it. "Your Majesty," said Darian, bowing his head. "The council insists that your continued absence conveys instability." Kyle's eyes grew cold. "My job security is not a matter for the council." Darian smiled. "Of course not, but rumors are dangerous." Ilara watched in silence, organizing documents. But he noticed something. Darian's gaze briefly passed over her. Too long. As if he were evaluating. As if calculating. And then he said, "I see you've already replaced the last assistant." Kyle replied curtly. "It lasted less than expected." Darian gave a restrained laugh, like all of them. When he left, the atmosphere became heavy. Kyle remained silent for several long seconds. "Do you know that man?" She hesitated. But she decided to tell the truth. "He is a distant relative of my family." His golden eyes fixed on her immediately. "And your family decided to send you to me." Understanding began to take shape in his eyes. It wasn't just disposal. It was about positioning. She felt a chill run down her spine. "I wasn't part of any plan," he whispered. He studied her intensely, as if piecing together invisible fragments. "They're all part of some plan," he murmured. The air grew heavy. For the first time, she perceived something beyond the coldness. Distrust. Not against her, but through her. He swiveled his chair around, slowly approaching. The assassination attempt came from within. The revelation hit him like a stone. "Someone from the council." She swallowed hard. "And you don't know who it was?" His eyes grew darker. "I know who carried it out, but not who ordered it." And then, in a low voice, "The traitor is still sitting at my table." Alara's heart raced. "Darian, your distant relative, connected to his stepmother, connected to his father." Her delivery to the castle was beginning to take on a different meaning. It wasn't just punishment, it was infiltration, or attempt. But their plan had a flaw. They had underestimated something. "If they sent me to spy on you," she began. "So they failed," he concluded. His eyes were no longer just cold. There was intensity, a flame she hadn't expected. He moved closer, so close that she could feel the warmth of his body, even while sitting, even wounded. The power that emanated from him was undeniable. "Tell me the truth," his voice deepened. "Did you come here with some ulterior motive?" She could lie, it would be safer, but she was tired of surviving only halfway. "No," he held her gaze. "Too long. As if you could smell the lie. But there weren't any. The tension has changed. It didn't disappear, but it changed." He stepped back slightly. "If anyone tries to use you against me, I will know." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. And implicit protection. That night, when she returned to her room, she found something unexpected. An envelope. No signature. Inside, just one sentence. "Beware of the man who smiles too much." She knew who he was. Darian. But who had sent the warning? Is anyone inside the castle? Did anyone know she was in danger? The following day, during the partial hearing at the council, the tension became unbearable. Kale entered imposingly, even while sitting, even wounded. The entire room stood up. Darian was there, smiling, observing. Ilara remained behind the king, in silence. Darian's gaze on her the whole time, as if he were evaluating whether she was fulfilling a role, as if waiting for some kind of sign. She didn't give any. During the meeting, one of the advisors hinted, "Perhaps it's time to consider a successor, should your Majesty's health not permit." The air turned icy cold. The guards tensed. Kyle did not react immediately. He just stared. And that look made the advisor swallow his remaining words. "My health allows me exactly what I choose to allow," he replied in a low voice. But Ilara noticed. That comment had affected him. Not physically, but in pride, in honor, in position, in identity. When they returned to the office, he remained silent for a long time. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "If I fall, the kingdom will be divided." It was not a declaration of power, it was a fact. She took a step forward. "So you won't fall." He looked up at her. There was something different there. Something was beginning to take shape. It wasn't just respect, it was necessary. He needed someone who wouldn't see him as disabled, not even as a tyrant, but as a man. "You still don't understand," he murmured. "What's coming is bigger than a throne." She felt the chill run down her spine again. "What's coming?" He didn't answer, but at that moment, hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway. A guard entered, pale. "Your Majesty, we found one of the counselors dead in the gardens." Absolute silence. "Murder?" Kyle asked. "Yes, sir." And the guard hesitated. There was a symbol marked on the ground, the same symbol as the attempt on his life. The traitor was at work again. And now, Alara was at the center of it all. The counselor's body was still in the garden when night fell. The symbol marked on the ground was unmistakable. The same angular stroke, the same circle cut in half, the same signature left in the assassination attempt on King Alpha Kale, Draven. But this time, something was different. Blood splattered in a crescent shape. A provocation. A warning. Inside the main hall, the council hastily assembled. Darian was among them, too calm, too worried, too convincing. "This proves that the traitor is still among us," he said, crossing his hands in front of his body, "and that perhaps he is closer than we imagine." His eyes discreetly drifted to Alara. Kyle realized, and he didn't miss a detail. "Are you implying something?" the king asked, his voice low but sharp. Darian tilted his head. "I'm just noting that your new assistant arrived shortly before things escalated," the hall murmured. Alara felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her. That was it. That was the plan. To hand her over as a pawn. To wait for suspicion to fall on her. To force Kale to act impulsively. To create instability. To weaken the throne. Strategic cowardice. Kale didn't speak immediately. He simply looked at Alara, and she understood. He was giving her a choice. Remain silent. Or fight. She took a step forward. My heart was racing, but my voice was steady. "If I had been sent to spy on you, Your Majesty, I would have failed miserably." Some laughed with disdain, but she continued. "Because I never received instructions. I was never contacted. I never received guidance. I was discarded by my family. I wasn't given a position." Darian raised an eyebrow. "And you expect us to believe that?" She turned directly to him, for the first time without fear. "I know you used to visit my house before I left." Silence. His gaze hardened. "My father believed that by sending me to the castle, he would be strengthening alliances." The murmur grew louder. Kyle remained motionless, but her golden eyes burned. "But," she continued, "if the goal was to use me as a spy, why wasn't I ever sought after following my arrival?" She stared at Darian. "Because the plan wasn't infiltration. It was a sacrifice." A jolt of shock ran through the room. Darian stepped forward. "Be careful with your accusations, girl." But she was no longer just the invisible girl. "The plan was simple," she said. "If anything happened to the king, I would be the convenient liaison. A new assistant, of questionable lineage, isolated, easy to blame." The silence grew heavy. Kale finally spoke. "Continue." She took a deep breath. "The real traitor needed someone to take the blame when the second attack happened." And then he looked directly at Darian. "And I needed that person to be disposable." The entire room turned to look at him. His smile disappeared. "That's ridiculous." But the mask was starting to crack. Kyle raised his hand. The guards advanced discreetly. "How long have you been planning this, Darian?" The king's voice was not loud. It was deadly. Darian took a step back. "You have no proof." Kale replied, "I have something better." He made a gesture. One of the guards brought a small object wrapped in fabric. When it was revealed, the air seemed to freeze. A ring, with the symbol marked on the ground. "Found in the private quarters of the deceased advisor," Kyle said. "Hidden under the floorboards." Darian turned pale. "That proves nothing." But her voice was no longer confident. Kyle continued. "That proves he knew something, and you were the last person to visit him before he died." The silence was absolute. Darian looked around, looking for support. He didn't find it. So he did what every coward does when cornered. He tried to attack. In one swift movement, he lunged toward Alara, attempting to grab her. But he hadn't counted on the guard's speed, not even with the king's instinct. Kale stood up. Not entirely. But enough. The muscles in his arms contracted with absurd force, gripping the chair's armrests. Her golden eyes shone brightly. A deep growl echoed through the hall. His wolf answered, and everyone felt it. Raw power. Primal. Untamed. Darian was pinned to the ground. "I should have finished the job when I had the chance," he spat, his hatred finally revealed. "You shouldn't have survived." The confession echoed like a sentence. The entire council testified. Kyle approached slowly. "You shot me in the back." Darian laughed nervously. "Because I knew I could never beat him head-on." There it was. The naked truth. Cowardice. Kyle leaned slightly. "You will be judged. Not secretly executed like you planned to do to me." He made a gesture. "But it will be public." Darian was dragged outside. The other council members remained motionless. They knew the game had changed. The traitor was not only exposed, it was destroyed. When the hall finally emptied, only Kale and Alara remained. The silence between them was different now. It wasn't tension. It was recognition. She approached. The gentleman stood up. He watched her. There was something vulnerable there. By instinct. He hesitated. And then he revealed, "The injury is not permanent." She stood motionless. "What?" He took a deep breath. "The doctor said recovery would depend on the wolf's strength, but after the betrayal, I stopped fighting. It wasn't his body that was keeping him seated. It was distrust, anger, pain." He continued. "A king who trusts no one has no reason to rise up." His eyes met hers. Until now, she felt something tear inside her chest, not out of fear, but it's about belonging. He extended his hand, not as a king, but as a man. "You weren't sent to destroy me." She held his hand. "I was sent to disappear." He approached. "Then disappear as my assistant." She didn't understand right away. Until he finished. "And remain as my queen." The air hung suspended. She was never chosen. She was never a priority. She was never wanted. But now, a ruthless alpha. A feared king. A broken man. The choice. Not for convenience. Not as a strategy. But for truth. A few months later, in front of the entire kingdom, Darian was publicly judged. The evidence was presented. The confession was repeated. The corrupt alliances were exposed. He did not beg for forgiveness, but he pleaded for mercy. He didn't receive it. He was exiled to the Greylands, a wild territory where dishonorable wolves survived like shadows, a fate worse than death, because he would live knowing that he lost to those he underestimated. Ilara's stepmother lost her position. Her father lost prestige. Both were removed from strategic posts. Not out of revenge, but for the sake of fairness. Cowardice does not govern. Betrayal doesn't prosper. And forced sacrifices don't stay hidden forever. On the day of Ilara's official coronation as Queen Alpha, the castle looked different, clearer, more vivid. Kale remained standing beside her. Not supported, not forced. Standing. The whole kingdom saw. The king they said was broken. The man they said was condemned to prison. The Alpha who was almost destroyed by betrayal. He was standing upright, strong. And he wasn't alone. When the ceremony ended, he leaned slightly and murmured in her ear, "You made me want to live again." She replied with a gentle smile, "You made me exist." And at that moment, Ilara understood something profound. She was never weak. It was never disposable. I was just in the wrong place. The castle that once seemed like a prison has become a home. The man who seemed ruthless turned out to be protective. And the destiny that began as punishment, it ended up being a choice. But the greatest victory was not the throne, not even the downfall of the traitor. It was a transformation, from invisible to indispensable, from rejected to queen, from a broken king to an alpha who can walk again.